This is the Prostate Pit Stop. One man's journey, everyone's fight. With Keith Smith and Matt McCleary. Sponsored by the Ferry Project. Visit our website, ferryproject.org.uk. Hello and welcome to this episode of the Prostate Pit Stop, where we are talking about prostate cancer and Keith Smith's journey through diagnosis, treatment, recovery, all of that. And thank you so much for clicking over here and joining us. My name is Matt, so hi, I'm Matt.
Hi, and I'm Keith.
Welcome to our podcast. Now, Keith, the last episode we were chatting about the good news you had received, that after your operation, you have got the all clear. So that's great.
It is. And that was wonderful news. And it's what you expect here. Yeah, I just we've been talking, haven't we? And I just thought about it. One of the things about it is everything's focused on the actual cancer and getting over the cancer. Actually, I think there's a whole space where we don't talk about what happens afterwards. You know, because the support stops to some extent. Medical support stops. So, what's life like after cancer, and what's it like having had cancer and stuff? So it'd be good to talk about that now, and just to talk about what I found over the last couple of weeks since being told that I was free.
So the aftermath, then, as you were saying, I've wrote a book actually about my cancer journey called "Standing in the Storm: Living with Faith and Cancer." If you want to go check it out, please do. I still have copies available for sale. So woohoo! But anyway. There is a chapter in that book called The Aftermath, where I go into some sort of what happens after the whole thing is over. And I describe it in a way, I relate it to Hurricane Katrina, where that massive hurricane in the United States in New Orleans, many years ago now. But the thing is, apparently you go around New Orleans today, and there's lots of rebuilding that's been done since the hurricane. Lots of things have been put right, but there are actually lots of places that are still destroyed, still derelict, still haven't been touched since that, even over a decade ago now. And, coming out the other side of cancer, I think, is a little bit like that, where some of your life gets back to normal. Some of it kind of gets rebuilt or renewed, but then some of it just doesn't. And you carry that with you, always. And so, it's interesting. It's interesting talking about the flip side, really, the other side of coming out the other side, having experienced a trauma, really, of going through cancer. So what's it been like for you?
Well, I can understand what you were saying there, Matt, about the hurricane and stuff. But it's very early days yet, because it's all sorts of things. Because it's the operation and the fact that my prostate is gone and the consequences of that. And there are all sorts of physical challenges around that. Just simply, so the whole thing about incontinence, they did say that there's a challenge around incontinence, and if you're going to have the operation, you want your nerve bundles saving, and I had to lose one set of nerve bundles because it was very close to where the cancer was. So I've been learning how to live controlling my bladder without my prostate, which has been an unusual experience in itself. It's unusual to, even as a man, have to think twice really about the fact of can I control my how I wee and stuff, how I urinate,
and how long is the car journey, and should I go to the toilet before I leave, and all that kind of thing.
And certainly in the first days when I had to use pads and stuff, and hats off to all the women listening to this podcast. It's interesting because those types of things in your head are more associated with women. So there is a small bit about sexuality and stuff, and that's an interesting experience. But that in one sense that's okay. But yeah, it means that you were mentioning about how there's been changes. So now I have to just think. So when I cough, sneeze, laugh, I have to think differently. I actually have to control that part of my anatomy where I never ever thought about that at all previously. So that's interesting. Still think there's a learning process going on there. I've come out of it very well because there are some people it takes a long time for them to get to a stage where they're not leaking. I now probably only have an occasional leak, maybe even only once or twice a week, and we're only 3 months in. The doctor's saying I'm doing very well, but even so, for me, having a leak at all is
yes,
is an interesting
thing.
Yeah,
yeah,
it certainly is. And I know it sounds funny, and again, there'll be lots of people who can associate with this, but just having to check that you haven't actually done a leak when you didn't notice, and you've got a little stain on your trousers and stuff like this, that's something I never had to do, and I've had to start doing that, and that's interesting. It just changes life. So there are changes that have been made as a result of the treatment. My sex life has been impacted. They said it would. I spoke with the doctor about it. He said it's still very early days, and he said I'm still, moving into recovery rather than anything else. So, I'm nowhere near long term, but I've got a very good wife, and our relationship's very strong. So that's been okay. But again, that's interesting. That's
an impact anyway. Yeah.
Yeah. So things have definitely changed. But yeah, it's so there's differences. I'm still not clear in my head, as you were saying, about areas not being done. I'm still not certain how I feel about it all.
You are early on. I mean, I wrote that chapter about 4 years after, so I had a while to sort of go through stuff and be able to look back. So, yeah.
And it's very weird. It is weird, the idea, because everything for me happened. So I was diagnosed on something like the 2nd of December last year. And the operation was on the 7th of March, and then in June, I'm told that it's the treatment's done and dusted. So the whole thing is very weird, considering there was a time when they were telling me that, this is aggressive, this is stuff we need to act on quickly. There's all this, it's like a massive activity. It's like you say, it's like the storm, there's this massive storm.
Mm-hmm.
Then suddenly, oh, right, okay. Where am I now? What happens now? What can I do? What can't I do?
Yeah.
What do I, it's
pick up the pieces. What do I do with them? Yeah.
What does it all look like? So yes, we'll see how that part of the emotional journey goes, and I'm sure there is still more stuff to be done. As a Christian, I felt supported very much by church, and also personally by the Holy Spirit, but that part of God that lives in us throughout the whole thing. And I'm assuming that some of that support, both from God and the church, will help me over the next few months as I just come to terms with, as you said, the trauma. Because that's the first time in my life really where I've been told that, in a sense, there's a real, if things go wrong, you could die type thing. So the sepsis just happened, and it all happened, and everything was done so remarkably quickly. I was ill, and there was nothing I could do. That was 2-3 years ago now. Whereas this was far more slower pace than that, and I've actually been engaged with it. My brain's been involved in what's going on.
Let's take a little sidestep now. Speaking of trauma and experiencing trauma. And because, of course, this podcast is sponsored by the Very Project, which is a homelessness charity in West Beach, and of which you helped set up 27 years ago now. So you've now experienced the trauma of going through cancer. But of course, we recognize that those who've gone through homelessness have experienced trauma as well. Yes, okay, a different kind of trauma. So, what if someone's listening who is experiencing homelessness or knows somebody who is, how can they help them in that traumatic situation, or how can they help in the recovery of that?
Okay, so that's a really good question, and there is a lot of similarities. Um, so with homelessness, one of the things that can happen is that people judge. Now, with my cancer, actually, nobody's judged me. So it's not like if I had lung cancer and the doctor was telling me it was because I was smoking all my life, some people would judge me and say, well, it's your own fault. The good thing with the prostate cancer, in one sense, is nobody's actually said to me, well, you did X, Y, and Z, and that means that you got cancer and it's your
Yeah,
fault.
yeah, yeah.
With homelessness, one of the challenges are that people go through incredible trauma and they might have made some incredible mistakes. Um, but the challenge internally is how you feel about yourself and how you feel about what's happened and so on. So you can feel a failure and so on. And in that sense, I didn't have to face that with my cancer. So the thing that's similar is the fact that you want somebody who's prepared to listen and not tell you. Okay. So when you're going through trauma, what you need to do is just be able to talk about it and actually say, this is what it's like. And people to listen, and for people, if they need to suggest, well, have you tried this? What about that? And do that gently. And indeed, the doctors did, didn't they? So they told me, you need to do this. We'll be having this operation. You need to think about this. You need to prepare in this way. They were telling me about doing my pelvic floor muscles. So they gave me advice, but it was up to me to take it. And I needed support from people who loved me and cared for me. And homeless people are in exactly the same situation. Even if they've done stuff that have caused a problem, they still need support, and they still need people who care, and they still need people who are compassionate. And the key is that I was treated as an individual. So, I wasn't put through a sausage machine. Well, I think we said in one of the earlier episodes, one of the things that was most important to me was a nurse in the King's Lynn cancer unit, who I could phone up and just talk to. I talked to her on several occasions, and she was lovely, and she listened, and she did, she was supportive and suggested things, but also did things to help when she could, but would made it clear that she was on my side. And I think there's a lot of similarities for homeless people. They might have made mistakes and so on, but they need people who are on their side and who are prepared to support and help, and at times say, you're wrong, or don't do this, or the nurse told me things that there was no point doing, and so on. So there are similarities there. I think with all trauma, we assume that my experience of cancer and your experience of cancer are different, aren't they?
Yeah.
Your trauma is your trauma, my trauma is my trauma.
Mm.
What we can say is it's emotionally impacted us in a very significant way, and homelessness does that to people. So one of the key things, I mean, the jargon for it is trauma-informed support, but it's the idea of treating a person as an individual and listening to their story and just being there and being supportive for them to help them with what's happened to them and to help them cope. And that is a major part of the work. That's a major part for homeless people. And the support team that we have at Ferry Project and the work that they do in that way is amazing. But what they hear and what they listen to and how they respond is just tremendous. And they've saved many, many people's lives and supported many people on their journey just by being there, listening and not being judgmental.
That's brilliant. Now, earlier on, you were faced with a choice of treatments, either to not get any treatment, or to go the operation route, or to go the radiotherapy route.
Yep.
You chose the operation route. So, looking back on it now, would you make the same decision? Any regrets?
I would definitely make the same decision. So I know prostate cancer isn't that uncommon. Mine was unusual in that for prostate cancer, it was aggressive. It wasn't like other forms of aggressive cancer. But for me, for what the doctors were saying was it was quick growing. So we had to do things quickly. Speaking to other people, so I've got friends who had radiotherapy. And what they haven't had to deal with is some of the issues around the sexual issues I was saying and the incontinence. And indeed the actual operation itself, but they've had to deal with other treatments. The thing that I've got is I got an all clear. Now, for many of them, the treatment they've had, they don't get that same definitive all clear because what the doctor said to me is I have a negligible PSA, which means that they, as far as they're concerned, they think I'm totally clear. Some of my friends have still got PSA readings who've had radiotherapy, and so doctors are having to keep an eye on them and have to monitor it much more closely than they've told me I'll need to. So what I feel I've got is, as long as I can cope with the impacts of the operation, I should have a much clearer path going forward, much less challenging. And I'm not saying that having the radiotherapy means that you're definitely going to get prostate cancer again. I'm not saying that, and indeed most people don't. But I just feel I've got it's much cleaner. I know I can get on with life. Some of my friends still are being monitored much
under
very,
that
very
shadow.
closely.
Yeah.
Yes, it's still just there, and one of them's got a PSA reading still of 2. And the doctors are saying, well, you're okay, but he's got a PSA reading of 2, and he's having to look at it. And whereas I do not have to think about that, genuinely. If I start getting a PSA reading, they've got to go and play and hunt the prostate cell and stuff. So it'd be a very different experience. So no, I'm happy with what I've got. I'm sure other people are happy with. Well, I hope they're happy with their choices. I think in either way, there were consequences for the operation. Neither route is easy. But I'm content with what I've chose. So I think it's right for me and where I am in life. And the fact that, hopefully I've got another 15, 20 years of life to enjoy, and hopefully without any need to worry about prostate cancer.
That's great. Well, Keith, unless anything drastic happens, this is probably going to be our last episode. So yes. I just want to say thank you so much for sharing your story, and I really do hope that it helps people, that it benefits people who, whether they're going through cancer or something similar, or whether they're trying to support someone who's going through a diagnosis or something like that, that it really helps people in whatever way, in multiple different ways. So thank you so much for sharing your story so openly with us on the Prostate Pit Stop.
My pleasure, Matt, and thank you, and thank you for the conversation from a fellow cancer sufferer. It's been a good way to actually talk. I think you've done me a lot of good in this process.
Thank you as well for listening to the Prostate Pit Stop. We know that it's going to be online for at least another year, so do keep listening, sharing, passing on, because the information doesn't grow old. So keep listening, keep sharing, and thank you so much for joining us on Keith's journey. Thank you.
Thank you, and goodbye.
Thanks for listening to the Prostate Pit Stop, sponsored by the Ferry Project. Make sure you subscribe and share.